Hi, Flosstube. I am happy to have Dr. Lynn Anderson here again to talk about her other role as the director of the Sampler Archive Project. And I'm going to have you tell how you got into that position.
Well, the Sampler Archive is, its goal is to locate and photograph and document samplers, American samplers. And I got into it because when I started learning about samplers, I couldn't find them. I mean, I could find books, and I could see the same ones in book after book, but I didn't know where the other ones were.
Right. I mean, as somebody who was professional in the university, professor,
researcher,
you were like, well, there must be a repository.
Exactly. I thought there was a list. There was a list. Where's the list? I would go to a Needlework conference and I'd ask, so where's the list? And they said, what list? And I would say, I mean, the list of where all the other samplers are. And they would say, well, there isn't any list. I said, the samplers are the data. You can't have a scholarship on something if you don't know where your data are.
Exactly. And because people moved all over the United States,
that's
like, you know, Litchfield or Lexington or whatever samplers are not in the town.
That's right.
Sometimes there's a few of them in the town,
that's right.
But they've been sold, they've been moved, great westward migration, and so you can find a sampler way out. In fact, I purchased a sampler in Amsterdam that is from Newburyport, Massachusetts.
Oh, really?
Yes. So things have really spread out.
Yes, there were samplers in Oregon, which is where I'm from, that are from Kentucky and Tennessee and Indiana and Vermont.
Right. And I mean, who would think, if they're researching Tennessee samplers, who would think, oh, I better check out all the historical societies in Oregon.
No, you wouldn't.
But also that makes it just an intractable problem in a way, because you have thousands of possible places for them.
Exactly. And if you have money and you have time, then you can go and visit this little historical society in this county, and this one, and this state historical society, this big museum.
Right.
And scholars have done that in the past.
Betty
Ring did that, yes, and thankfully she produced these wonderful books. But I would like to participate in scholarship, and I don't have that kind of money and that kind of time.
Yeah, maybe we should say a little bit about Betty Ring, just a short little bit about Betty Ring. For anybody who doesn't know, Betty Ring in the, I think, 70s and 80s, and then into the 90s. Went to historical societies, and this is pre-internet. I mean, what she did was phenomenal. She pulled out samplers out of all these little societies and museums and everything, and documented them in her own archive, and then found the newspaper clippings, and then she organized it all. Like when we talk about Ohio samplers, nobody knew what an Ohio sampler was. Or she talked about a Newburyport or a Salem sampler. Nobody could look at it, and unless they said, worked in Newburyport, Massachusetts on it, nobody knew that. But when she pulled all of these samplers out and just kept documenting herself, she started putting them into categories. And then she wrote, was it 3 or 4 books?
Well, she has a compilation of articles, and then she has the 1983 book on the Rhode Island Historical Society exhibition.
Right.
And then she has the two
volumes.
Two volumes of Girlhood Embroidery.
Girlhood Embroidery, and those are the Bibles. And I know that not everybody has them on their bookshelf because they went out of print very quickly, and they're incredibly expensive to purchase now. Don't steal them off of a friend's shelf. But if you do find one in a library, take a look at it, because that is really the gold standard. And we are so indebted to Betty. But she spent decades of her own money doing this. And this is what you're saying right here.
Yes, and that's a wonderful foundation. But that's not all of them. I mean, these are the ones that she located, and these are the ones that, and she did a fabulous job of pulling together groups done by students of the same teacher or at the same school in the same locality.
And she was in some respects, the originator of that big framework.
The whole notion that these are school products and that you could identify the school and you could identify groups of samplers that were done at the same school really is a tribute to her and her work. But it's not all the samplers in the world. It's not even all the American samplers in the world. And so we are trying to locate, the Sampler Archive Project was developed when I realized there was no list and that I wanted to know more and other people wanted to know more. So we decided to work directly with museums and historical societies, work with them to get high resolution images. We worked with scholars to develop a protocol for documenting samplers so that we're all using the same terminology. And the reason that's important is that then when we put it online in a searchable database so that people, the public, can access it, it's not just for the scholars, it's for anybody, and it's free, then you can search across all these institutions. So one of the samplers in the MFA, Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, another sampler in Oregon, another sampler in Tennessee or New Orleans, but they may all have been done at the same place. If you say, tell me the samplers from this town in Tennessee, for example, they all come together. Or a sampler done in a certain year, or a sampler done with a certain motif, or a sampler done with...
Right. And all of us who do sampler research know that, you know, there are varying qualities of photographs of things, and often there's no photograph. There is sampler, Massachusetts, maybe a girl's name, and you're like so excited because it might be related, but you don't know until you see it visually, and there's no image. Because it's expensive to get the high resolution images taken and put them and then get them onto the databases in the museums.
Yes. It's very time consuming. The documentation that we do we do 3 types of documentation: the physical characteristics. What does it look like? What are the features of it? There's little interpretation as possible so that there's agreement across the documenters. We also do the object history, so what has happened to the object? Has it been conserved? Has it been exhibited? Is it talked about in the literature? And then the most time-consuming part is the maker family history.
Right.
So we try to identify the girl's parents, the community. Part of this is to document that it's an American sampler, because we're only and we don't know sometimes.
Yeah. Seems to me like we should bring up the website.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, because it is publicly available already. And there are how many samplers on it currently?
So the public can see about 5,000 samplers.
Right.
5,000. But it's at least another 10,000 in the pipeline. Which
and
means
more coming.
all the time. I mean, we were talking to a museum just the other day, the Concord Museum, and they said, yes, of course we want our samplers in.
And another very large museum
the
too,
MFA
with hundreds of samplers.
And nobody says no these days. Early on, people were less comfortable with their stuff being on the internet. But now they understand the power of integrating information from institutions, repositories, and private collectors as well as public collectors.
That is a big thing.
It is a big thing.
That is a big thing, is that, you know, once it gets sold, it could be out of view for 100 years. It could go down in the family. And you don't know that one piece of data that could just pull together this incredible story. And it's in private collection. But private collectors like myself, like Alexander Peters, and
there are
so many.
Yeah, Glee Kruger's collection was almost 400 samplers.
Right, and then and many of us have been allowing our samplers to be photographed and go into the database, as well as, and we're going to talk about that at the end, is how you get new samplers. But let's look at the. So Lynn, let's take a look at the website, see how we can see some samplers.
Okay, so this is the homepage of the Sampler Archive website, samplerarchive.org. And as you can see on the right-hand side here, there are 6 different ways that you can browse the contents of the website. You can choose, for example, object type. You can also browse by contributor, or place made. So let's choose family record to begin with. Is it not? And you'll notice that then the results of that search come up, and there are samplers here in these results from multiple institutions. This is where it really becomes powerful, because you pull together examples of what you're looking for from multiple institutions across the country.
So I see we have Winterthur Museum here, early on, and we have, I think you said DAR
yes,
Museum, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island Historical Society, the DAR Museum in Washington, D.C., Daughters of the American Revolution. They were our first 3 pilot sites. And we did their collections. Initially, they helped us develop the protocols for documenting the samplers, along with many other scholars who got involved.
Okay, so what you wanted to collect, what information you wanted to collect, what kind of photograph you needed, etc.
Yes, they helped us make all the decisions and to develop a protocol that was used standardized vocabulary, so that if we were documenting stitches, we all used the same name for the stitches.
Got it. And that's really a huge problem in embroidery research.
And there was a lot of disagreement. We just had to come down and settle down, and then then the people who do the documentation, we train them to use our vocabulary.
Right.
And the reason that's really important is because if you're going to search on something, everybody has to document using the same terminology, or you do not find the same.
Or you can't find it all, right?
You can't find
and you were telling me before that the sampler archive ID number, that it really tells you how many samplers there are. So there are about how many samplers in this website currently that the public can search?
So there's about 5,000 that you can see.
That's amazing.
That's available for the public to see. And up here at the top is the number, the sampler archive number. This one's SA for sampler archive 230. So it was
right.
And then there are about 10,000 or so other samplers from other collections, other museums' collections, private collections, auction houses, dealers that are in the pipeline. It's very time-consuming to get to them to the point where they're accurate and available to the public, and it's so it's time-consuming. So it takes things a bit of time to do that.
But I think some of that point is that Sampler Archive needs more resources, because when you started this, you weren't really that sure of how many samplers would come out of the woodwork.
I had no idea.
You had no idea. You had no idea. I mean, you're at 15,000 samplers, and I would say from talking to you that you haven't scratched the surface yet.
We've scratched it, but we haven't gotten too deep.
No, not too deep at all.
Yeah.
I know of I know so many that are not in it yet.
When I talk to people who are really familiar with the collectors and the museum collections and so forth, the estimate comes around 30,000. And now, as we get higher and higher, people are going, oh, maybe it's 40,000. Oh, maybe it's 50,000. So,
yes.
And this is just American samplers.
Just American samplers.
Yeah, we're not talking about samplers in England, and there are many more there than here.
Oh, yeah. Well, so here on this object details page, we actually have the ability to enlarge the picture, right?
Right.
So it's beautiful, but
what comes up when you select something from your search results is this object detail page. It has some basic information on the right-hand side, who owns it and so forth, the girls did it. But down here we have a button that says enlarge. And that leads you to the high-resolution image that we took when we worked with this museum. And you can zero in on different parts of it. It takes a little while to res in. Let me see if we can get over here by the...
Oh, yeah, by that beautiful chenille work.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. Look at that. So if you're interested in samplers, you can probably lose a few days going down rabbit holes. Oh my God, looking at a sampler, looking in on the high resolution and kind of wandering around it here, and then looking at ones that are similar to it. So it's not just really for researchers, but people who might be wanting to stitch a sampler. Maybe the reproduction you're trying to stitch is in the database. You can see something closer.
Some of them are. Yeah. Some of them are. And also just maybe interested in the history of a community, and then this is women's history of that community, and you can search on that. And I wanted to show you one other thing that is unusual and I think a real contribution here. So this is some basic information. It also links to the contributors. So every single sampler goes back to a page that we have developed for that contributor. So you can always learn more about their collection, or see everything from their collection. And then we have the more detailed documentation. So we documented on physical characteristics. That's what you see.
Right.
And with, again, as little interpretation as possible, the type of needlework technique, the dimensions, the text should be transcribed so that you don't have to hurt your eyes reading it, which is sometimes very hard on samplers. We've transcribed it. And documented colors. Sometimes we get to see the back, and so we will have documented the back colors as well. Then we also have information about the girl and her family, and to the extent possible, we'll tell you where we got that information.
Oh my God.
So if you click on it, here it came from the object, but also from the vital records, the main births and christenings.
Wow.
So
you're backing up your information.
Exactly. It's very important. A lot of people claim things about, who made what and where. We try to get to original sources and get as much evidence to document, to back up what we have stated here in the record.
Well, then it allows somebody who is doing research to know where you got it. They can go get it.
Right.
And without as much searching,
It also
you're streamlining it.
Yes, that, and it also means they can decide what level of credibility.
Right.
So if we say a tree on Ancestry.com, and that's the best we could do, then they can say, okay, that's a start.
Right.
But I need to go dig deeper.
Dig deeper, yeah.
Or if we're saying vital records or find a grave or things like that, you can have more confidence. So there's that. And then, then we have information about object history. That's the stuff that has happened to the object since it was made. Sometimes we know about previous owners, any kind of conservation effort, exhibitions if it has been in an exhibition, and where it appeared in the publications.
At all. Yeah. Right. And what's the related objects part? Is that something coming?
Yes, it's something coming. And we hope, once we get the time to do it, basically, and get enough samplers in it, it's actually being recorded as we put the information in. If we say, okay, this is from the Balch School in Providence, Rhode Island, and we link it to other samplers from the Balch School in Providence, Rhode Island.
Right, when you get to that point of the database fabrication, you'll be able to put that in there.
And now you can still search on it.
Right.
You can search on Balch School, but it'll
automatically populate it.
Another thing it will do that you would not normally search on is it will show you a mother's sampler or a sister's sampler, or
that's nice.
Or if we know there's a quilt that she did later in life, it will tell you where that quilt is, or a portrait of her. Wow. So those are the long-term plans.
Right.
But right now we're just trying to get the things
get all the samplers out there. So let's look at it. Let's look at some more samplers.
Okay.
How about something in the? I was surprised to see you have map samplers.
Yes.
And look how many.
Yes.
Globes and things.
We have all of the Westtown samplers in here, and Westtown is the one that owns most of the globes. These are globes that are made at Westtown School, and there's two types of globes: terrestrial globes, which show the Earth, and celestial globes, which show the sky. And some girls did both.
Wow!
So this is we worked with the Westtown Archives, Mary Brooks at Westtown Archives. She's now retired. And we have all of their samplers. If I remember correctly, there's something like 150 samplers or so, and globes are represented here.
Look at that. All
With
that
the
information on her parents, everything, where she was doing her religious meetings. That's a lot of information that can be used. And this is just so obviously women's history. Bringing them back from obscurity. This is fabulous. This is absolutely fabulous. So how do new samplers happen? If we're, not new samplers get made, but I mean like,
I know what you mean.
How do you
get samplers?
Get samplers, right?
So we work directly with museums, historical societies, private collectors, dealers. We work directly with them, and sometimes it's spaced out over time. So we'll do the first 50 of their collection and go back and do another 50. Sometimes we try to do the whole
Because you have to hire a photographer, an object photographer, a very specific one.
We have to pay for that. Everybody else's time is volunteer, but the photographer has to be paid for.
Which is why there's a little donate button here.
Yes.
You know? And I know you wouldn't say it, so I have to say it for you. Yes. You know, you've received
we've received a National Endowment for the Humanities gave us very generous grants to get the database programmed.
Right.
And to develop the protocols for documenting.
Right.
That's long gone and long done. And now we have been getting some private funding. We have some very generous private donors. And we are also working on, as you can see here, the Vermont Sampler Initiative. One of the things that we are doing is trying to work by state and try to find all of the samplers in the public and private collections of that state.
Right, and not just of the state, like were made in the state,
right?
But I mean, you don't
all American
say you don't say no if somebody comes with it. You don't say that, right?
No, of course, because all American goes in the sampler archive. We're feeding the sampler archive. But you asked, you know, how do we get them? So one of the things we do is these localized initiatives, either a state or a county, and then we also ask the state or the county or people in that for funding. For funding, right. So the Sampler Initiative in Vermont, for example, we had a $5,000 grant from the Vermont Humanities Council. Right. And that paid for the photographer.
For the photographer, right.
In these sampler initiatives, this is a little different approach to locating the samplers. So instead of working one-on-one with a museum, we canvass the state for all the museums, all the historical societies, anything we can think of, and get recommendations for private collectors. And then we hold sampler ID days.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
It's kind of like Antiques Roadshow.
Right.
But we don't give any appraisals. We just take the photographs.
Right.
And then
the information.
And then we have people there, volunteers, trained to document the sampler using the protocol that lends itself to being fed into here. It's all done online. So we get a professional photography done, and when they bring their sampler, it gets photographed and they get a copy of it. And then we also document it on the physical characteristics, and the rest we can do by just gathering information.
And the important point, because we saw when we were clicking on a sampler and looking at it really closely, is that you have to hire an object photographer who knows how to build the setup so that he can take a picture of something that's glazed, glass. It has glass framed, right?
And glass,
Right, without having like the 5 people who are ogling it at the moment, leaning over it, you know, taking a picture, you know, in the glass reflection. So that's not cheap to do.
No, it's not cheap, and we have been very fortunate in that we have found people who get photographers who get very excited about the project and are willing to travel. So we have this wonderful photographer that we used for the Bennington Sampler ID Day last November 2022, a year ago. And his name is Thomas Andrew Clark. Well, he's gotten very excited about samplers. He knew nothing about samplers, but he is a photographer for a museum. And so he has all the skill, and he had also worked in an auction house, so he has all the skill.
Yeah.
And he likes doing it. So we trot him around all over Vermont, and he takes all of the photographers.
I mean, from a photographer's point of view, right? You know, he's taking these pictures, but he has a gaggle of people around him who are volunteering, who are like, ooh, you know, getting all excited. And so there must be just a tremendous amount of excitement in the room when somebody walks in and they put down a package and they open it up and everybody goes, oh, you know, kind of thing. So I can imagine that, you know, and you're not there. Because, you know...
I'm not always there.
Sometimes you're there.
When we started the Vermont Sampler Initiative, so we've done 5 Sampler ID days. Each one is a 2-day event.
Right.
I was at the first one, which was at Bennington.
Well, you were training, right?
And I was training them and getting it launched, and also the leaders. I worked with the local leaders.
Right.
And that was their first one, and they were nervous, and so we worked together. And I happened to be at the second one because it occurred at a time when I was on the East Coast. But I haven't been on any of the others because by then they're trained. They know what to do.
So this can be like a sampler guild or, you know, a group of friends who care, about samplers can get together and decide, hey, nobody's looked at my state yet, or my county. Maybe county.
County is a little easier to take on.
It's a little easier to take on, right? You know, they get together, they contact you, and then you start working with them to say, this is the way it's done, this is the format we do it, this is what best practices is, this is what works.
And we have materials that we can give them, handouts, and
this is how you promote it. Well, so this can be really fun with a group of friends, and I hope that people will think about that, because as you were telling me the other day, there are very few states where this has happened so far.
That's right. So the first one we did was Delaware, and then we started Rhode Island, which we're still working on, and Vermont, and then the Dutchess County. So there's lots of states that have not been done in
Listen
this
to
way.
That, ladies.
Yes, there's lots
and gentlemen. There are a lot of states, and especially the West, the middle of the country and the West, where things have come out. And you told me that when you started, people thought that there weren't any Vermont samplers.
Well, yes, because in Betty Ring's book,
right.
Did we talk about that?
No, we haven't yet. We did. We talked about her book, yeah.
So she did not cover Vermont.
Didn't do any
She did all of New England and mid-Atlantic states and a couple southern states, but did not do Vermont at all. So the message was, well, there isn't any. She didn't say that, but you know, there's not there. So we did homework before we launched this, and we could find them in various private collections and stuff. So we knew there were some. And then we launched this, and we now have found in the collections approximately, I think it's just under 600 samplers have come in for documentation. About 60% of those are Vermont
samplers. Once you've investigated the girl, et cetera, like
exactly.
that.
I mean, we're still not sure exactly what the percentage is.
That's incredible.
It is.
Though, from 0 to a
And
lot.
they're stunning. There are many groups that are really unusual and stunning samplers. So it's not like it's all marking samplers. I love marking samplers, but it's not like it's all...
But it really says that we're at the cusp of knowing women's history. We are at the beginning. There is so much untapped. And I have been following the Sampler Archive project for a very long time. And it is a worthwhile venture. It obviously needs funds always in order to be able to keep the photography going. We need to find some good interns to speed up putting the documentation into the database clearly, and some funds for the interns.
There's me.
There's you as the director.
I have the database programmer who also helps me with the images and so forth. And then there are the volunteers wherever we're doing it.
Right.
So
there's a role for everybody. Those who want to donate, those who want to be involved in a state initiative or a county initiative or a town initiative even. I mean, just start it out and get it going and find out what you can see. And then you get to see them live. I mean, you know, why come to YouTube to watch them when you can actually just have them brought to you like on a platter, right? You know, at an initiative in your city or county and get to see them live. So I really hope that people think about this, peruse the site, enjoy, maybe do some research of your own. And thank you so much, Lynn, for coming and talking to us about this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So after Lynn and I had an opportunity to talk and record the session for Flosstube, we talked a long time about how everyone can get involved in the Sampler Archive project. And that led to some discussion about the ability of private collectors and individuals to enter samplers into the system, not directly into the database, but by submitting them to the system. Previously, there have been 3 ways that the Sampler Archive found out about samplers. First, direct collaboration with museums like we talked about, or historical societies or dealers, auction houses, and then doing the state or the county-wide sampler initiatives we discussed, or doing samplers selected for sampler exhibitions. But then there's a 4th approach, and now Lynn has made that active on the website, like I'm showing here, a new way for individuals, for private collectors, or people who are at historical societies to input samplers into the system and get them on the radar and available for documentation. So that is the new sampler search submission form, which you see here, and I have done several samplers already into this form. So you go to the Sampler Archive website, as you see here, and you come down and click here. So you open up the form, and here you get a Google submission form. You can click here to download a copy of the form if you want to write it out and mail it in. But if you are going to fill it in, here, name and address, and I put in my post office box, email, phone number, name of the sampler owner, maybe it's a person, maybe it is a historical society, where it is, and then if you're a private collector, a museum, historical society, or maybe family, which is even the best, you know, if you happen to be the family or descendant of the sampler maker, that's fabulous. Click next, and then what you'll get to is the samplers themselves, and it asks you to put in a sentence or two describing the sampler, such as if it's signed, it'll be a sampler with 5 alphabets, maybe a verse made by Susan Cole, or an embroidered map, or the unsigned needlework with brick building, etc. So how many do we want to put into the archive? In this case, I'm going to do a sample one. Brief description of sampler number 2, poly sampler maker with house and flowers and verse. And I would then come down here. Do I have any other samplers I wasn't able to insert here, which would enable me to do another form? Do I have any images of the samplers I submitted? So I'm going to say yes. And of course that you are not the robot. And then you can submit it, and you'll get a submission form. Thank you for it. It will take a long time for anybody on the team to get back to you. Inclusion in the database, of course, is only for samplers, meaning embroideries that have been made in a school situation that were also American. So if you submit ones that are English, they won't be able to put them in if some of the genealogy is showing that it's an English sampler, or please don't submit things like a quilt or crochet or things like that that are not associated with an actual sampler. If you just happen to have work that your grandmother did, but maybe she did when she was in her 60s, don't submit that. But if you do have something that is, you have a sampler and you have the family quilt and the family other items that she did, you can write that down in the notes there and submit that, and the team will be very interested in it. But this is a fabulous new way to increase the number of samplers that are known. And of course, this is actually women's history, because often it is this handwork which is the only evidence that a woman ever existed.